Welcome everyone to the Co Creators Convergence, our Thursday night call. Every Thursday night, we have a conversationalist. And my name is Noelle Marshall, and I'm the co-founder of the Co Creators Convergence. And beside me is my beloved Bob Warner. Together we call ourselves Light Partners. And then we have Karen Trujillo Heffernan, who is also one of our co-creators that puts these programs together. And we thank her very much for being here. She'll be monitoring the chat and helping us along the way. So tonight we are going to be treated to a short film. It's about 9 minutes long that Sekou Writes. Well, he'll tell you about it. He had an experience, and in the moment, he became a filmmaker. And I hope it brings a lot of good discussion here tonight, because more discussion is needed. And what these two gentlemen, he's here tonight with his co-star, Reverend Marius Rush, and he will be doing a centering prayer for us momentarily. So I just want to welcome everyone, and you can sit back, relax, but I do hope that when it comes time for the conversation, that you will turn on your video and join in. So right now, I'm going to ask Marius to lead us in a centering prayer as we bring this time together and have a wonderful conversation. As I said, it is so needed, especially in this country. So Marius.
Thank you. Prayer is a soul's sincere desire. It is to be either unuttered or expressed. It's the motion of the fire that trembles in the breast. It's the closing of an eye, the shedding of a tear, the upward glancing of an eye when none but our God is near. The Lord is indeed our truth, our light, and our way. Dear Lord, we ask that you constantly teach us how to pray. This is our moment that we're coming into right now, a wonderful discussion. And we know that it's going to fully be a centering moment that is not only going to ground each and every one of us, but it will lead, guide, direct, and also protect each and every one of us. We hope and pray that all that be done, that it be his will, and that his will move each and every one of us forward. This we ask, and we say together, amen.
Amen.
Co-Creators Convergence is a group of people who study with a visionary, a futurist. Her name was Barbara Marx Hubbard. And Barbara was actually ran for Vice President of the United States in 1984. And I say, if you ever want to know about Barbara Marx Hubbard, just go to YouTube, put in her name, put 1984. You will see her address that she did at the Democratic National Convention. And you will be amazed at the wisdom of this woman, her foresight, and what a different country we would live in if we had listened to her. She obviously didn't get selected. Geraldine Ferraro was selected as vice president that year, but she kept teaching until she was 89 years old. And so we studied with her for a year, a group of us, and we just wanted to continue her work. And she had a wonderful question that she would ask. She would say, what is your gift to the shift in humanity? And when she first asked Bob and I that, we kind of shrugged our shoulders and went, we don't know. We just kind of like, we live in an RV and we don't know much about conscious evolution or any of this kind of futurist stuff that you talk about. And so we ended up actually taking a film. She has a film called Our Story, which is part of Humanity Rising series that she did. And we took that to all 48 states and Canada and showed that film and then just had conversation afterwards. So that's kind of how we, and the group that came together, we have just been together ever since, and we invite other people in. So that's what we like to do, is to lift up the gifts that other people are bringing to humanity. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. It can be anything, tonight happens to be a film by Sekou Writes. And I met him, I saw him on a new platform that's just coming out called New Thought Media. And so I saw that presentation. And I said, I would love to have more conversation with Sekou and be able to share it with our group. And we do have this going out to Facebook to at least, that's what Bob's working on right now, to over a dozen different groups. And I think Karen is also sharing. Be sure to share it to Sekou's page. Yeah. So without any further ado, let me just tell you a little bit about Sekou. So he has done this film, Test Driving While Black. And it's a short documentary film that turned a journalist into an accidental filmmaker. And his college roommate, oh, I didn't know you were roommates, into a reluctant spokesperson for the intersection of racism and fatherhood. So he describes himself as a jack of many trades. Currently, he describes himself as the accidental filmmaker and a full-time creative. So we want to learn more about what he does. Now, his roommate is also his co-star. So Marius Rush is a licensed ordained minister and real estate investor who divides his time between Nashville and North Carolina. So gentlemen, we welcome you both. We're excited to have you here. And I'm wondering whether, Sekou, you could just give us a little bit, before you show your film, just give us a little bit more setup about, what happened and about your accidental. Of course, I don't think there are any accidents. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disagree with you right there, Sekou.
Right.
So I think you're all guided. So I'm going to turn the talking stick over to you, Sekou.
Okay. So as you mentioned, I'm a journalist, or that's one of the many things that I do. And so my branch of journalism is automotive. So for many years, I've written about cars. So I was in Nashville and doing a test drive, and I asked Rush to be the driver while I shot him driving the car. And so that was the genesis of what happened. So I already had my film equipment, I had my camera equipment, and we were doing this shoot that was ostensibly about the car, because that's what I do. But then something happened at the very beginning of the shoot, and that something that happened changed the tenor of the day, our moods, and what we felt like doing that day. And so we were able to pivot in the moment and really talk about what just happened, as opposed to the car that we were driving. And that's how this film, Test Driving While Black, was created. Yeah. Oh. So that's a little bit of what happened. And I want to see, once I play it, how much that fills in the gap about what happened to us that day. But I wanted to just check in with Rush to see if you want to say anything before we get into that.
No, I think you've appropriately described our experience and how all of this came about. In that way, it was all accidental. It was purely all about the car, and but now the experience has definitely grown into much more that we're going to find out together more about the film, and hopefully have a good conversation about it.
Awesome. Wonderful. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, is that what you want to take us to the do a share screen now? And
yeah, I'll do a share screen now, and then we'll come out and talk all about it. So,
okay, sounds awesome.
Screen. And
I'm just going to ask everyone to mute, so except for our guests.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right.
And did you click the box so we can hear it?
Yes. Share.
Okay, very good. Very good.
All right, here we go.
I know you were in Nashville at one point test driving again, and you and your friend were accosted by the police there.
This happened not long after the verdicts came down for Mike Brown and Eric Garner. And like a lot of people, I was upset by the verdicts. I had already done Mommy on the Move, which was about black women driving these cars, and I wanted to do black men at first just to show intelligent, articulate black men, period. I felt like that was a media image that needed to be out there, that people out there in the world needed to see black men being smart. My second decision was to ask my first interviewee to wear a hoodie in silent homage to Trayvon Martin. We weren't going to talk about it. We were just going to have him wear this hoodie. He actually did not own a hoodie. We had to go to Walmart the day of the shoot and buy one because he's a three-piece suit, bow tie, pocket square kind of guy, very well dressed. So anyway, we did that, and a few minutes into us taking pictures of him standing next to the vehicle, before we even started the shoot per se, we were accosted by these two white men who were not police officers, who had no position of authority. They just didn't like, I guess, the optics of these two black men, one of whom was in a hoodie, in this vacant lot. And they came to challenge us about where we were and why we were there and what we were doing. Then one of them started reaching under his sweatshirt as if he had a gun. It got worse before it got better, because then once we calmed down and they calmed down, then they started trying to sell us things that were stereotypically black, like barbecue ribs, pork chops. When they finally left, we couldn't do what we set out to do, which was talk about the car, because we were too upset.
Yes.
So I asked him on camera to tell me about what just happened.
Man, we're sitting out there getting to make some shots of the car, and the guy walks up, white male, certainly uneducated, began to try to sell us items that were of interest, that he thought might be of interest to a black male, a car with rims on it that is sitting in his family's home or property behind the home in the woods. Just a really unsettling piece with him. I've been reading a book called White Like Me by Tim Wise, and one of the things that Tim Wise mentions is that there is just this by natural piece of privilege and comfort that comes with having been born white in America. And what Tim Wise was suggesting actually showed in that young man this morning, that because he was white, because he was male, I think he felt comfortable with being in a natural position of authority. Me being a black male and having a son really causes a little fear that any black male it could be probable that they could have that same kind of confrontation. It makes me really concerned about what people think of us because of maybe just some other images in the media. Not necessarily who we actually are, but what they think we may be. My son had a substitute teacher a couple of days ago. He and I were talking about the image that we present of ourselves, and he was telling me how his substitute teacher was pretty hard on him throughout the day, making him not talk, making him sit down, and he kept saying that even the moments that she was telling him not to talk, it was when he was answering questions for the class, or when he had gotten up to maybe go sharpen a pencil, that she was really hard on him, as he thought, unnecessarily. By the end of the day, the teacher said to him, "Hey, you're nothing like what I thought you were." He said to me that he didn't understand what that meant until he and I were having a conversation about what we present of ourselves to others, and how we dress makes an unknown statement to others because of what has been presented to them, and maybe images in the media or what they've just come to understand of race, period. Substitute teacher who did not know that he's a straight A student. Substitute teacher who does not know that he just generally likes history, period. That the substitute teacher was mistreating him based on just how he looked. So it made me really concerned about what conversations I am not having with my children that I need to constantly make sure that I am having. Just making sure that they're more aware of the statement that they're making solely by the attire that they choose in the mornings. I remember being asked while I was at Morehouse College in the class in poli-sci Why do Black people riot if what has gone on around the country was the same situation that I experienced in the 90s with Rodney King? It wasn't that we decided to burn our own neighborhoods. It was that we were actually pushed into our own neighborhoods by the police departments. And there we were allowed to explode in our own anger, which leads me to my second point. Anger really never has a position of logic, or it's not meant to be rational. When you're angry, you normally respond in irrational ways. In rioting and burning our neighborhoods, we're not doing it because it makes sense. We're doing it because we're angry, we're bothered. And not angry just because of the recent situation. This has been a piece that has been boiling inside minorities for, who knows, decades. Decades in my case, probably centuries among generations. Because not much has changed. Never really gave hoodies a whole lot of thought until all of the things that were happening with Black men in our country and police officers. My personal feeling about hoodies, they're actually quite comfortable, especially when I put the hood on itself. I really wonder if people can see me or what they may think of me if I'm trying to hide as opposed to trying to keep warm.
And that's it. That's the film. So,
Thank you, Sekou. Thank you.
Thank you for having us and hosting this. And I want to circle back to what you said about accidents, because it was accidental, quote unquote, right? But what really stands out to me looking back at it is the fact that I plan to address issues of racism in a very subtle way. Like, I wanted Rush to wear this hoodie. We went to Walmart to get him a hoodie. He didn't have one, but we weren't really going to go hard on it, right? We're just going to touch upon it. And then the universe is like, no, no, we're going to have this incident at the very beginning of the photo shoot when you've got all your equipment, and let's just jump all the way into it. And it didn't feel that way at the time, to be honest, but I mean, it just aligned so perfectly. And I happened to have my film equipment, and it happened to happen at the very beginning of the shoot before we did anything really. And so it took some time to reconcile the feelings, but once I did, you see how everything came together for the highest possible good. And I should mention that this is a years-long story. That incident happened in 2015, and I created the film in 2015, and it started going to film festivals then, because a lot of people think that I created this, or this happened around George Floyd, but it happened a long time ago. And I actually brought it back at the end of 2019, so before George Floyd. It just so happened that I brought it back, and I thought that would work well with this play I was working on here in Nashville at Fisk University. And then that kind of brought more energy to it. And then, you know, other things happened in the world that made it just as relevant now as it was 5-6 years ago. So Rush, you want to say anything about your experience? You want to piggyback?
You're muted, Rush, Marius.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in the way you're describing it having been accidental. It, you know, certainly we did have a purpose with the hoodie. We were certainly trying to project a mild image, but I know I certainly had no expectation that this day was going to go as far as it did. So in that way, it was purely accidental. But also it having been, you know, so directed in our experience, so directed toward about race. While it was accidental, I don't know that it was uncommon. And to me, that was what, you know, the entire moment bothered me the most about, that while it was accidental, it probably isn't an experience that is uncommon.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I would ask, is this uncommon? So you guys kind of set up the situation a bit, but in your personal experience, is this just reflecting something that typically happens, or have you actually been in this situation kind of before?
Sure. I mean, we've got lots of stories, unfortunately, and the stories happen on a continuum. Like, this film could have been made any time. It could have been made just now, could have been made as it was 5 years ago, but it could have been made years before then, when the Rodney King verdict happened, as Rush mentioned in the film itself. So unfortunately, there's that continuum. And for us personally, and I won't speak for Rush, but I know, so I just speak for myself, I know that there is a continuum of experiences that we've had. And I first started using my discomfort around these incidents as content a long time ago, as a way to help get it out of my system, and onto paper, so that it's not as damaging within me. But the incident started very early in life. I took this film to a group of kids. I think it was an after school program, but I think they were like 5th or 6th grade. And I showed it to them and I asked them if they could relate to it. And I wasn't sure what to expect. And these kids started telling me their stories of experiences of racism that they had just had or had had recently that just blew my mind. It would be like if Rush's son told the story about the substitute teacher that was told in the film, as opposed to Rush telling it. It was a bunch of those stories. So unfortunately, we start having these kinds of interactions very early on, and we have to figure out how to process them.
Absolutely. I'm just so pleased when I saw you first give this presentation on New Thought Media. I was so, I was going like, this is the first time I've really been able to eavesdrop, if you will, on Black men having a discussion about, that was like a first, and I, am I in my bubble? Would I not welcome that conversation? That's not the question, but I just feel so grateful that you're bringing, that you, number one, did it, number two, are sharing it more widely. And that, I'll just say one other thing is that because it was filmed in 2015, now I know why Marius wasn't wearing one of your hero hoodies.
Yeah, it's all coming together. It's all coming together. Yeah. And
I was going like,
there's a couple of responses I have to that. So let me just do the hero hoodie thing quickly, because I think it dovetails well. Like Marius said at the very end, the bonus scene, he talked about the fact that was his first time wearing a hoodie. It was really comfortable. But then he has to have that kind of dual perception about how it feels to him versus how it might be perceived. And honestly, me working in the hoodie space now it's an attempt to reappropriate the image of a Black man in the hoodie, with something positive, to take it into, to shape it into something else, in addition to the other things I'm doing with Hero Hoodies. Like, that's part of it. And so I want Rush to speak to that. But I also wanted to say that, there's so much, there's so much.
This is your platform.
It's very amazing that you had the thought that you had, that, you know, it's great to eavesdrop on this conversation. Let's continue the conversation. But I also want to make the point that we're kind of eavesdropping on the conversations ourselves. Like, I didn't know about Rush's son having that experience. Like, it took the incident that happened that morning for us to start talking about these types of things, because often we shield each other from our pain, and we don't talk about these kinds of experiences unless we happen to be ensconced in the experience together. So that's what happened. Like, we had a kind of similar trauma together, and then the rest of the day we talked about similar things. And I talked about some of my things too, they just weren't on camera, but that got us talking. And so it's about getting outside of the bubbles for, you know, across the aisle, so to speak, but also within.
For all of us, yeah.
So go ahead, Rush. I know you're going to say something.
Yeah, but it's definitely about getting out of the bubble. And the bubble is an experience that we all have. And, you know, in this moment, Sekou and I are sharing being outside of the bubble because we will just share this experience together. But all of the other things that, you know, that are happening in our individual lives, we're not talking about those moments because it's our bubble. I think what, you know, when I think about getting out of the bubble and, you know, the movie Brown Boy Mad, then, you know, what changes the bubble? What impact can this have on the bubble that we're all living in, experiencing, whether that bubble be experienced as Black males, the bubble being experienced as white male, white female, Black female, whatever that experience is. What is it that we can do to move out of the bubble and then begin to have more of a collective experience, like the one that Sekou and I did end up experiencing that day? And I think we're doing it now by having conversations openly about our own life experiences, the similarities of them, and sometimes the varying differences of them, and where we can find some common ground in them. So yeah, while we're all living in a bubble, maybe it's time that we put a pin in the bubble and pop it.
I have a comment. So I agree that, you know, there are these bubbles, and I think like the issue is that what you all experienced is the norm. As was noted, this could have happened, you know, it happened in 2015. It could have happened today. It could have happened in 1965. It could have happened at any point. And I think that as Black people, it's just part of life, something that we deal with. And so you asked like why, you know, about like why we aren't having these conversations. And that's because it's been normalized and we hate it. And I don't want to speak for all Black people, so let me just not say we. I said, you know, like I dislike it. I don't like how it makes me feel. It makes me sad when I see things happen on the news. But I feel like I'm not ever shocked. Whereas I think that people that don't have our experiences, you know, they are shocked. So I think it's great to have conversations, but to get us out of the bubble. But it's just such an experience that I don't know if other groups can relate to. See, I took some other notes. Oh, I'll just stop there, but those are my thoughts on it.
I want to piggyback on that. So I think the reason that Test Driving While Black resonates with so many folks is because we're talking about our personal experience. Like there's no theory. We're not talking about concepts. We're talking about what happened to us. And I think that's why people have been able to access it a little more maybe than usual. And you've heard Rush reference this book in the film White Like Me, and that's a riff off this book before that one called Black Like Me, in which a white man took these drugs to pigment his skin and then experienced life as a Black person. Well, he came back saying all the things that we say all the time, right? So it's no surprise to us. It was a surprise to him. But to Jelana's point, like when we tell these stories outside of our bubble, we are often not believed. And so I am grateful that there's something about the way that we're telling this story that helps people understand it. And I think, I don't know, but I think it's about Rush talking about a son. I think that's the part that gets people, because a father talking about being afraid for his son is universal. Like that's just a fatherhood concern. And I think that's part of what pulls people into the story and makes it a little bit more accessible.
And you know what? I agree with you. And when you think about George Floyd, it was like he was calling for his mother. And that's something that, you know, I think would resonate with most people. But unfortunately, it took that to kind of like wake America up. I feel like it's almost like people think racism started in April 2020. And just, you know, the reaction to it from corporations to, you know, my neighbors or whoever else. It's just like, this has been going on. But you're right. It's like, it seems like they finally believed it because they saw it. But you know, it's just like flabbergasted.
Yeah, I kind of consider that moment like the Edmund Pettus Bridge of our generation, of our time. Like this is our Bloody Sunday. It was a time period when everybody happened to be home.
Yeah.
The screens because of the pandemic. And so
exactly.
that much more attention, that many more eyeballs on it, and it changed hearts and minds. And I'm grateful for it.
Me too.
That it happened, but I'm grateful for the greater receptivity of our stories. And I'm glad that I already brought Test Driving While Black back out, because I'm grateful for this interest, and I'm grateful that it helps have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah. I definitely agree that people, it's almost like they were forced to pay attention because everyone pretty much, you know, had to be at home and, you know, for the most part, still at home. So I think it's the pandemic, you know, it kind of helped put the spotlight on things that may have, you know, other people just may not have even paid attention to. So it kind of like brought it to the forefront.
Sure.
If anyone else would like to jump in the conversation, you're more than welcome.
Well, I wanted to ask Rush about the story with your son. Like, we are now familiar with that story because of the film, but what happened as a result? Like, you had that interaction around the substitute teacher. What happened after that? Because again, that's not the kind of thing that we talk about.
Oops, muted. Marius, you're muted.
Trying to find your mute button, bro.
I'm having great difficulty here. Yeah, it did not want to come off mute, no matter how much I tapped it. That's not good. So yeah, I was saying that about the substitute teacher. You know, one of the things that I'm hoping that happened with that particular substitute teacher, that, you know, following that entire moment, that she was able to change her perspective and take that to her next experience as a substitute teacher at another school. To not, you know, immediately see a Black male child as problematic in the classroom solely because it was a Black male. So I'm hoping that it impacted literally that person more about their behavior in the next classroom experience. For my son, what did it mean for him? For him, it was, you know, his first experience. Boy, I don't know quite how to say this, but you know, we all have moments where we remember our first, whatever those first were. Unfortunately, there's also a first time where African Americans experience their first moment of racism. And this was his first. It was his first experience having to realize and acknowledge that he was a Black male. And unfortunately, that first experience for us, that should not be a negative experience. It should be a positive moment, that the first time that you're acknowledging who you are. For him, it was not a positive moment. But it was also recognition for him that um, if this is happening for him so young, it was an immediate recognition for him that this was something that maybe is lifelong, and that too, as a parent, was painful, because we often, just as parents, we look at problems for our children. When we see problems with our children, we're looking to solve them and then on to the next issue, right? But it was another immediate acknowledgement for both him and me that maybe this was something that isn't going to be able to be solved immediately, but something that he's going to have to learn to manage in moments throughout his life. And, I'm not sure if that's singularly his experience or takeaway, or is that mine as an adult Black male, knowing that this is something that while it was his first experience, maybe not something that can easily be solved and that he will never experience again. What it did for him, though, was it made him want to be more active. It made him want to be more involved in the classroom. It made him wanted to learn more. It made him really push his other friends and peers to be more outspoken. He really wanted to not only change that person's mind and attitude, but he wanted to change the minds of others around him, including his friends. That first experience, though, and I think we've all had them. I shudder to use the plural pronoun we, because that's maybe not fair to all. But I feel like we have all had our first experience with the acknowledgement of race and how problematic that can be in even a simple moment like that for him in an elementary school classroom.
Yeah, and it's particularly troubling when first converge. Like for me, one of my first experiences with racism overlapped one of the best firsts ever. One of the best firsts in anyone's life is their first car. So when I got my first car, the very first moment I sat in my car, that how that feels like, because we've all been there. We've all gotten the first car. Remember how excited you felt and that sense of freedom. But minutes into sitting in the driver's seat, I was accosted by these police officers that thought I stole it. And so it marred that experience for me. Like you only get your first car once. So my memory of my first car will always be connected to that experience with those police officers. And it took me a long time to even talk about it. Like it happened and I didn't talk about it. I didn't tell anybody about it for a very long time. And I actually gave that car away. I didn't even sell it. And I didn't even understand why I did that until much later. But the angst that was kind of embedded in that experience was too much for me, I think. I just let it go. I gave it to a friend. And so it's very unfortunate when we have those first experiences of racism that overlap other firsts that are supposed to be epic and beautiful. So yeah, I just want to piggyback on that.
You know what? And those first experiences, we're talking about the outward experience, how we're exposed the first time to racism. But in the movie, Brown Boy Mad, we also are exposed to Tim Wise and him talking about the inward experience of being exposed to his own inner racism. So while we're able to have a conversation about our own first experiences, when I think about Tim Wise and then his first experience of having to acknowledge his own inner racism, I wonder, on the other side of that same discussion, are there some similarly situated first that others are having with an inward experience of of racism. And I know that's a hard thing to look at. You know, Tim Wise talked about defining himself as privileged, and privilege as a result of him having been raised as a white male in America, that his natural privilege and racism comes out as a result of who he is and where he's raised. He talks about it in relation also to, you know, just being a white male, how it's just impossible to not have some semblance of racism or race embedded as his own inner experience, in the same way that it'd be impossible for me or Yuku to say that there's absolutely no way that as men that we are also not also sexist. Now, different grades, certainly different levels, but you know, it would be impossible for us to say as men, especially to a woman, that there's absolutely no way that we have an inner experience of sexism. And that's what Tim Wise is talking about in his own inner experience of having to acknowledge his own level of racism. So as much as we're talking about our outward experience with racism as a first, I wonder if there's the same similarly situated for others with an inward experience of racism.
I'd like to speak to that if I could. Hi, I'm Olivia, and I'm so glad, I'm so honored to have this conversation, to have you share this. Because so often it's like the elephant in the room that nobody talks about. And I had an experience of implicit bias where I was aware enough that it had happened, and because my own body felt such shame. And you know, when you feel shame in your body, it's a horrible feeling. And I remember that I'd been put on a diversity committee at the institution where I was teaching, and it was not going well. And I remember hearing something come out of my mouth. I was so frustrated because we weren't getting anywhere, and it was very frustrating because I could sense this undercurrent. And then I said something. I don't even remember what I said, but it got me so, it was really traumatic for me. And what it did is it really was life-changing for me, because I went to somebody and I said, look, I used to run human relations groups when I was a high school teacher. I need to upgrade my skills because my body told me that I had made a blooper in my white privilege. And so I went and got help, and I'm still getting help because one of my students wrote in her journal in the course that I was teaching at a graduate course at the university, a woman of color, that she had experienced microaggressions from two white students, a male and a female, in a classroom at the university. And the teacher had not done anything about it. So luckily, we have our equity and inclusion program at that university. So I went to the people there and I said, is there anything that's happening that I can be a part of? Because I feel so badly that nothing is being done and that students are experiencing this. So I enrolled in difficult conversations where we would have white affinity groups of faculty, and then we'd have also people of color affinity groups. And, you know, I've been involved with white privilege conferences, you know, but now I'm really putting myself through it because I know it's so ingrained in us being part of this white supremacist culture and worldview that we don't even realize it. So I heard somebody on a talk show the other day who really lost it because she said, I'm not prejudiced. I'm not prejudiced. You know, a white woman who had no idea how she was really being racist with people of color in the room. She had no idea. She honestly believed that she was totally without prejudice. And I think that's one of the hardest things that we as white people, and speaking for myself, are trying to get in touch with. Tim Wise did it, you know, and another person, a woman, white like me, you know, but it's an ongoing thing. And the first step is acknowledging that you're racist. And often people get so defensive about it that the conversation can't go on any further. You know, that's one of the biggest things that white people do. You know, it's one of the defenses. But anyway, I really appreciate a man, I don't know if you know him, but Resma Menachem. Have you heard of him? He's a social worker, a man of color. And he's doing these really important self-study groups with people who are white and also people who are of color. And we're doing it individually, and then we're going to do it together, and we're doing it over 9 months.
Wow.
So, and he said, you're not going to go to your book circle, your book club, and say what you've learned, and you're not going to teach it. You're just going to be there. And there were 773 people at our first meeting for an 8-hour Zoom meeting last Saturday.
Wow.
Wow.
And he said to us, I guarantee you that not everybody is going to be here at the end of the 9 months. But to me, as hard as it was, as grueling as it was, because, you know, there were wonderful women of color who were sharing their pain, you know, and I mean, I felt so privileged that I could be part of that conversation. And also that I will find myself in a place where I can learn. I can learn. And I know it's not going to be easy. My body hurt so much by the end of that 8 hours. You know, I'm an empath. So I was feeling, and I wasn't crying because I know that's what white women do. But, you know, I was really grateful that I have found myself in a situation where I think it's going to really help me get at my own implicit bias. And if George Floyd did anything, and Breonna Taylor, you know, because we were all stuck home in COVID, people really felt the humanity of it. They had to stop. We had to all stop. When, as you were saying, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. It's Chilana, is it?
Yes, that's it.
When you were saying that, when he called for his mother, you know, oh my gosh, who can't feel that? You know, that must have gotten to everybody. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. I apologize because I had to run another meeting and I missed your film and I want to see it. So I hope that I can find out from you where I can see it again, because I got a little bit of a sense of it. But as a former teacher, my heart goes out to your son.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah. And for your car, your first car.
Right.
Awful. Yeah. So anyway,
In regards to
thank
seeing,
you.
and Noelle, you said it's going to be included in the
Great.
Yeah,
yes.
that'll be
Perfect.
in replay. So you'll be able to
Thank
see.
you for being generous and letting us see the recording then. Thank you, Noelle.
Thank you for being interested in this conversation.
Oh, I'm very interested. I don't want to put my mouth, you know, I'm going to be quiet now before I put my foot in my mouth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a couple questions. This is Sa. Can you guys
I'm
hear
sorry,
me?
who's speaking?
So,
Sa.
Okay, go ahead.
So for Reverend Marius, I have two questions. Well, this question, I guess, is for both Sekou and the Rev. What is it? No. Sorry, I can't share my video. I'm doing my hair, Noelle.
Okay.
It's a Black woman thing. Some serious work going on over here. But yeah, so when do you guys think is the right time for the talk in terms of age? I know Rev, you talked about your son being in middle school and sort of having this interaction, right? So at what stage do you guys think it's appropriate? Recently, I recommended to a friend that his daughter's only turning 2. And I was like, there's this great book. I know the author, and it is Anti-Racist Baby. And he was like, yeah, that's probably a little too much for me, right? Whereas for me, at 2 years old, my baby is going to be hearing me saying, B is for Black, P is for power. Like, that is something that you do. So I'm interested in how you guys both feel about when you have to have that talk. And also for the Rev, I want to know if there was anything subconscious for you in not having a hoodie.
Okay. Cool. You wanna tackle, or you want me to go?
Well, I know your answer. So you go ahead. Go ahead. I know what you're about to say.
No, there really isn't anything subconscious about the hoodie. But it's just preference and choice, to be perfectly honest. Nothing at all. My father, seeing him get dressed for work every day, he's just constantly in a 3-piece suit and, bow tie. And so I learned my clothing preference really from him. That's one. Second, if there is some subconscious reason for me not wearing a hoodie, was definitely something that I didn't really begin to think about until I got older. That I did get to be a little more aware about how I present myself, as opposed to how that may also be viewed and the optics of it. So unfortunately, wearing a hoodie for me, I oftentimes the older that I get, I would really see the optics of it, of maybe how someone else might view it. And so yeah, I probably did. The older I got, I chose to not wear hoodies because I didn't want to play into what I thought may have been some of the assumed stereotypes of that others may have. Whether they're grounded or not. Realize that they're maybe not grounded. They're definitely not factual, but it doesn't also keep others from playing out those stereotypes that are obviously embedded in their minds. It didn't stop those 2 men that particular day that Sekou and I were videoing a car. And who knows how much the hoodie played in some of the assumptions they had, because I really can't think of any other thing that may have been a negative stereotype assumption. If I'm going to exclude race, if I exclude gender, then the only thing that's left in that moment is that I'm wearing a hoodie. So if I exclude race and I exclude gender, and then all that I'm left with is that I'm wearing a hoodie, wow, then these 2 men were intimidated and immediately afraid because they're 2 guys that are wearing hoodies. So hey, so maybe there's this group of people out there that are afraid of hoodies. I don't know. But their experience, immediately upon interacting with us, obviously I'm being sarcastic. Certainly, I believe those 3 things were at play: the hoodie, the race, and the gender. That their involvement with us was, again, probably about also their own stereotypes that they have, and their own white privilege. There are a lot of things that in the movie about that particular experience that isn't mentioned. One is, this is in Nashville, where we were filming that day was a main thoroughfare in a major city. It was a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. And literally where we're filming on this main thoroughfare, it is it is a high traffic area. We were clearly in an openly visible area. The other thing that isn't mentioned is the car itself. We were 2 Black men in probably the least intimidating vehicle that anyone could ever drive. It was a minivan. So, then again, all that we're left with is the optics of it for those others. The only three things that they're left to see and have some negative assumptions about that are inciting enough fear in them to attack us with guns, is that we're Black,
And
is that we're male, and that we're wearing a hoodie. Go ahead, Cook.
Before you move to the other part, Russ, just to double down on that, not only was it a minivan, not only was it broad daylight next to the Walmart, all the things that you just said, but the posture, the physical posture of taking photos is universal. Everybody knows what this is. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm taking pictures. Like, you can see that body language from a mile away. So it's the hoodie and the assumption of us doing something negative based on our skin color that overrode the fact that I'm obviously taking photos. I've obviously got camera equipment hanging from my neck. All these obvious things you think would stop somebody before they got to the point where they were threatening us with a weapon. But none of that came into play. So it's like you get locked into this idea of, well, let me rephrase that. There is that undercurrent, that subliminal seduction that seduces all of us. And it suggests that Black people are up to no good. And it comes into play subconsciously all the time. And it's not just for white folks. It comes into play for us too. Like, there is this doll test
Absolutely.
in the 1940s where the children, Black and white children, were shown a Black and white doll and asked which one is good, which one is bad, which one is dumb, which one is smart. And consistently, it's the white doll is smart and it's the Black doll is bad. And my cousin actually recreated that experiment in like 2012 or so relatively recently, and it was the same results. And so we're all being subconsciously programmed all the time across the board. And so, to your point, Olivia, you have to become aware of it. You have to just accept that that is true, that all of us are being programmed to believe in this idea, the social construct of whiteness and how that construct is better than Blackness. And it's not until you accept that that's happening, that the subliminal seduction is happening all the time, that you can begin to exercise your cognitive muscles against it, because you have to push. You have to push cognitively back, because if you don't, it just continues to seduce you. But you can't push, you can't exercise those muscles until you become aware of it. All right, I got off on a tangent there, my bad.
If I can just build on that, I think what I saw on this talk show was exactly that, because I think the difference between myself is that I know that now because I've been immersed in it enough. And believe me, it wasn't easy for me to get there, because I was in denial like every other person, until you get it. And even then you don't get it. You know that you're not getting it. That's the next stage, Oh, wait a minute, And then I think, but what's important is that this is where my other work comes in, because I work with people's brains and with trauma. And when we get defensive, we don't make the best decisions. So it's an accident waiting to happen. When somebody is on the defensive, oh, I'm not prejudiced, they're not thinking, they're not going to take in whatever. And this poor woman, this lovely woman of color, who's also one of the hosts on this talk show, a rather new, has just joined it, was so careful in the way that she was trying to help this woman get underneath her own lack of awareness, And I felt for her so much, because I know what that's like. I've been in both places. And I guess that's what I want to throw out to us, is how do we deal with that? How can we, as a person in a group where that's going on, what is the best way to create a learning environment where that awareness can happen? I think that's the question that I'm asking myself, both with myself and with other people when I see it happening. So I don't know if anybody has an answer, but that's kind of where I'm at, because I could see it didn't work for somebody to say, but don't you see what's going on here? You know, she couldn't see it.
Okay, Olivia, thank you. And we're going to have some remarks to that, but I want to get Jelana in here. She wanted to speak. She wanted to contribute as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like you.
So the conversation like sparked some things that I remembered from the earlier days of COVID, and how, you know, is recommended across the nation or most states that, you know, everyone wear a mask, right? And so in some cities, African Americans were not wearing masks because when they went into public places, it was assumed that, as Sekou said, that they were up to no good. And so, you know, when you hear about all these disparities early on, it was like COVID testing and COVID deaths among, you know, racial and ethnic minorities. It's like, okay, you're recommending practices that for some people, it's like they may lose their lives if they do that, you know? And so I think that it's just like a persistent issue. And the question that was just posed is like, you know, what can be done to help people like see it, or just, I don't know, be okay with being uncomfortable, essentially, and not like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess just being okay with not being uncomfortable. I think that I'm not sure of the best way to educate, because I know that I was in a situation where in an environment at work, and it was expected that I would educate my colleagues about racism, and that is very traumatic. I ended up crying, turning my video off, and just saying, I don't want to be a part of this. But this was something that they wanted to talk about regularly, you know, set up a regular meeting. And I was like, I can't be a part of that, because it does bring up so much, because it is kind of, these experiences are like normalized, but they hurt every single time. So, I mean, I could say that the solution, or not, maybe not the solution, but something simple that people can do is just treating everyone with dignity and respect. I think that that is a first step, and not making judgments or assumptions about people just, you know, for the color of their skin. And it's really that simple. But I just don't know if it can happen, because there's so much historical messages and beliefs that have been ingrained. You know, people learn these types of things early on. And so it's kind of like breaking someone else's norm and telling them that like your life is a lie. So I don't know the best strategy, but hopefully the country is in a place where we can start to have these conversations a bit more. And I think that that's what's going on today.
Yeah. So I want to jump in. So
I would like to jump in whenever you all feel.
Okay. So I want to piggyback on that and talk about artistry, because I am essentially an artist. I do a bunch of different things, but essentially I'm an artist. And I have found that the creative arts are an effective way to facilitate conversation. Like what we're doing right now. I mean, this is essentially a movie. I mean, you know, it's short and it's a documentary, but it's art. And so it facilitates conversation. But also, I showed this film at Fisk University, or I've been doing a little bit of work, and it brought up so many stories. To Jelana's point, it brought up so many stories, so many negative experiences for the students, that I realized I had to figure out a way to vent that anger. I had to pivot, because that wasn't what I planned to teach about. I had a plan, but then when I saw how much anger came up, I was like, okay, we got to figure out how to give these students the tools to convert this rage into something better, something that's more constructive. And so what I ultimately did was give them writing exercises that were designed to kind of excavate those feelings. And I think on the receiving end, for the mainstream population, seeing the art, seeing our experiences of racism expressed as art is more palatable. Like, it's not as confrontational and it's easier to grasp. So the play that I created is called Brown Boy Mad. And because of COVID, we couldn't meet to sit in a theater and watch the play. So I converted it into a film, which expanded the audience, which meant that some of my friends back in New York who are white were able to see it. And they were able to talk about what a difference that made. Being able to see our experience from an artistic point of view made it resonate more. Like it avoided any sense of triggering defensiveness or guilt. It was just, oh, I can understand it now because the play is written as a conversation for us, by us, amongst ourselves, about the pain of microaggressions on a daily basis. So my answer is art. And before I forget, because I don't want to forget, I have also created a podcast just today that is about that. Like, what happened after the play was released as a film, some of my friends back in New York said, we have similar stories, and they started sending me those stories. And so what I've done now is converted those stories into a podcast form so that people can listen to us tell our true stories. And when we tell our true stories, there is nothing to argue with, really. You hear us, you hear our voices break, you hear our voices crack, when you understand the pain that we experience on a regular basis. When you hear those stories, it makes it more accessible. So anyway, I invite everybody to check it out. The name of the play is Brown Boy Mad, and the name of the podcast is Brown Boy Mad Unmasked. And right now it's on, as of today, it's on Anchor and Spotify. And so just go and listen to the stories. All right, that's what I want.
Awesome. Maybe Karen, you could put that into the chat. And we also have someone who wants to join the conversation. Lenora, if you want to join the conversation, if you'd like to start your video or just start talking, whatever works for you.
Lenora, you realize you got your hand up, right?
Yes, I know.
What's happening?
Okay, so let me get my glasses, the TV, everything in spotlight. But my experience, I wanted to share because it was during the time of Sandra Bland's death. And I live in Mississippi on the rural part, 12 miles from, the closest Walmart or, at that time it was. But I was driving home from work and dark, no street lights. I pull up to the stop sign and I immediately saw the police officer to my right back into the bushes hiding. So I stopped completely. I made my left turn into the left lane because if I had went over to the right lane, I thought it would alert him and he would, pull up behind me. But anyway, he did. He pulled up behind me and he followed me for about a half of a mile. So I got over into my right lane because I needed to turn right. And when I made that right turn, it was on a dark road, no lights. And that was the only road, the back road to get to my house. So when I turned and he turned, he drove about a half a mile and then he turned his lights on. So I immediately called 911 because at that time also down here, police officers were pulling women over and they were raping them. So I was petrified. My heart started racing. And the first thing I thought was, Sandra Bland got pulled over and ended up in the jail and she's dead, and I didn't want to end up like that. So he pulls me over and I call 911. I said, I want to make sure that this is a police officer pulling me over. And by the time she answered me, he was at my window and I had it about this far down and I could hear my voice over the, speaker from his radio. And it let me know that he was a true police officer. So he said, license and registration. So I gave him my license and registration. And he said, did you know that your light on your license plate was out? And I said, my what? He said, the light on your license plate is out. And if you don't change it, I'm going to pull you over every time I see you. So I said, well, you don't have to worry about me. You won't pull me over tomorrow. I took my license back and my insurance card. And the next day I was at AutoZone to get that light. And he was there the next day at that stop sign waiting. So it's not only men, it's women and possibly even children that we have to watch out for ourselves. And it's just sad that we have to live in fear to go to the grocery store or walk down the street that we may not return home. So I just wanted to share my story with you all, and that's it.
Yeah, these
Thank you.
stories, these experiences accumulate. Because as I mentioned earlier, you know, me buying my first car was tainted by that experience of racism. And as more of these experiences happen, they accumulate and you end up having an inordinate amount of fear when something seemingly innocuous happens. You know, and so I understand entirely how Lenore felt in that instance. And sadly, we learn to deal with it. And because we learn to deal with it so well, people think that there isn't a problem. And so I'm glad that we're having conversations like this that help people understand that just because we're handling it well doesn't mean that there isn't a problem.
Right. Well, I want to, Bob wants to jump in here if that's okay. Bob?
Sure. Your mic's on. Thanks. First off, I want to honor and thank everybody that's contributed this evening. And it makes me sad, Marius, that your son had that first experience, and Sekou for your first car. I remember when I got my first car. It's a big deal. And, you know, the American, that's a part of, quote, the American dream, the American independence, the being able to be on your own. These are, and to have those kind of moments tainted in the way that they were for you. And also, Lenora, for your experience as well. We just can't imagine what we that are white, so much, I'll speak for myself. I can't imagine what it's like to be concerned about whether I have my license plate light burnt out or not. And that's going to be an issue or a confrontation or whatnot. The comment was made earlier about, well, Olivia was asking, what else can we be doing? And someone else was mentioning about being asked by fellow workers to teach them about racism. And one of the things that Noelle and I have experienced by not being on the road as we were in our RV for a year, for 10 years, and being in one location for the last year. After George Floyd, there was a Black Lives Matter group materialized overnight in Johnson City, Tennessee, here in our area. And we went to their events, and we quickly studied, not asking people to teach us, but took on the responsibility for ourselves of how do we educate ourselves? You know, I'm just so impressed, Olivia, that you're doing a 9-month course. But we read articles, for example, that said, if you're going to go to if you're white and you're going to a Black Lives Matter event or rally or protest or march, here's what you white folks should be doing. You don't lead the chants, you don't lead the protest, don't do this, you don't do that. Allies learn about the situation and be supportive of those that have had the lived experience which you have not. And that opened up for us a whole new opportunity for getting more involved in the organization that subsequently materialized out of that effort in the local city. I was just commenting to Noelle today that we've learned so much about racism and so much about lived experience during Black History Month, because we've made it a point to be watching documentaries, to be watching films, to be watching Democracy Now! And the issues that come up. And we also participated in a League of Women Voters Racial Equity and Social Justice 2-month-long course. And we were so inspired by that, which was watching videos, listening to podcasts, reading articles, and then discussion groups that we created one of our own that we did over a 4-week period on Zoom. And
We had a last class last night.
yeah, last class was just the other night. And it's not because, we've said at the beginning of each of them, we're not the teachers, we're the students. And because it's given us an opportunity to say, this is our responsibility. And so to, you know, for those white Americans that are sitting back and denying that anything, first off, someone says, I think someone said earlier, you know, now everybody knows it's real and it's here and it's now and it's contemporary. I'm not sure everybody does. We have local politicians in our state legislature representing this area that after the East Tennessee State University basketball team kneeled during the national anthem to bring attention to racial inequities and that sort of thing, we have state legislators in this area and city council members that are saying they just need to get over it, and they're being disrespectful of the flag and they're being disrespectful of servicemen. And that kind of crap isn't going to go on in our university, in our part of Tennessee. And so, no, not everyone does know that this still exists in our society and in our culture. Or if they know it, they don't want to accept responsibility for it and act from their heart in a different manner. So what I did have a specific question for you, Sekou. You said that you've been showing some of this at the universities, and you've shown the movie. What kind of reception has there been there? I guess I'm kind of attracted to this question because of the activities at ETSU, and we've been to a couple of protests with them. We've written letters to the editor and to our legislators about all of that. And what were the reactions of college students, and what would they suggest as far as ways to make the world a better place as a result of what you've experienced in your conversations with them?
It's been a very interesting experience. When I created the film 5 years ago, I took it to some film festivals. There were Black film festivals. So essentially that's preaching to the choir. That's preaching to the converted. That's our shared experience, our shared lived experience. And when I took it to Fisk, which is a historically Black college and university here in Nashville, I expected the same thing. There's one thing though, when I showed it there was one white student in the class, and he waited very patiently until everyone left to talk to me. And I thought, honestly, that he was going to say something defensive, because I've gotten that before. But what he asked is, how can I be a better ally? And the fact that this film and this work sparked that kind of question was amazing to me. It was tremendous. I didn't expect it. And I honestly didn't know how to answer it. I'm ashamed to admit, I didn't prepare for that. And so I think that I am more prepared now to have this conversation because of that student at Fisk who asked me, what do we do? And I think for me, at least, the answer is to promote the art, to take this film to as many places as possible that are outside my bubble, and let people see our story unfold. Because I think another one of the reasons it resonates with people is because of the duality. There's Rush talking about what happened with his son in the film, but then there's what just happened right before the film, like this kind of convergence of racial inequity. I think that makes it compelling. And so I guess if I have to bottom line it, I think that this film is moving the needle ever so slightly forward just because it inspires people to talk about it. Like you mentioned that we were on the New Thought Media Network earlier, and I didn't reach out to them. They reached out to me. Like they heard about the film, they reached out to me, and then you guys reached out to me. And I think that this film provides an access point that is, for lack of a better word, accessible. Like it just is accessible. And so my intention is to take it as many places as Rush will let me, and have more of these kinds of conversations. And I know, Rush, you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say the same. I think the conversation definitely is easier started with the movie itself. So sharing the movie as much as possible in environments like this, or obviously in an academic environment at an institution, sharing it with college students, even high school students. I think what needs to happen is, obviously this conversation is something that we have all heard said over the years, that this is a conversation that needs to happen. But the conversation requires a starter. And I really think the movie Brown Boy Mad is kind of the starter to the conversation that should probably be shown and shared on collegiate campuses. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and maybe mention the painful obvious. I wonder if it's best suited to be shared as often as possible at majority institutions. This is a conversation, again, we're talking about the bubble. It's a conversation that is similarly situated for those that have this experience often, which is us. I really wonder if having this same piece shown at majority institutions is going to be just as impactful, if not more.
Well, I'm going to jump in here. Thank you, Marius and Sekou. It's about that time. I don't know how it got to be that time, because it seems like time has gone so fast. But what I want to say is just one thing that I learned when I was learning more about the indigenous culture. And that was that when I was going through that training, they asked me, what unexamined assumptions do you have? And I was going like, well, I don't have any unexamined assumptions. What are you talking about? And seriously, I really thought I had no unexamined assumptions. I'm trying to spotlight myself, but it won't spotlight me. So I don't know if anybody else can spotlight me.
There you go. Okay,
there we go. So I thought I had no unexamined assumptions. And so they said, well, how about laws? And I went, laws? They said, it's unexamined assumptions that laws are good. All laws are good. I thought, well, I know that's not true. I said, well, have you ever examined that assumption? I went, no. So I got to thinking about it, and I kind of got to be an irritant in the class because I kept on thinking about it. And then I said, wait a second, it's an unexamined assumption that I can own property. Who says I can own property? Who? God said I could own property, or, and it just kind of went on and on. And so Bob and I are foster parents to two beautiful sisters that came to us from Honduras. And so of course they're Latino. And we went out, I just learned about this really hot. I just learned about this unexamined assumption. So we went out to dinner, and we went to some restaurant, Chipotle, and it was really loud.
Noisiest restaurant in the country.
Very noisy. So I said to my daughter, I said, Tanya, will you go up there and ask them to turn down the music? I mean, I can't even hear you. I haven't seen you in 6 months. They're grown and on their own. And we were just in town visiting. She looked at me and she says, they're not going to listen to me. I said, what? She says, yeah, you see that back there? I said, yeah. She said, they're Latinos. They're not going to listen to me. So I went, oh, okay. Well, why don't you go up there and see? And then, so she went up there and she came back. She said, no, they're not going to change the music. I said, oh, okay. And so I said, I guess I'll go up there now. And so I went up there and said very nicely, and I'm sure Tanya was nice as well, I'm trying to visit with my daughter. I'd really like you to turn the music down so I could hear. And so they said, okay, and turn the music down. And so it's like in my face, just it's, I mean, that's just like a little teeny tiny little microcosm of privilege and my unexamined assumption that there would be no difference between what my daughter's experience would be and what, their experience, is in the world. And so I just wanted to bring, I found that to be, when I think about the implicit racism, I guess I have to call myself a racist. It's so ingrained. But what I prefer to call myself is an ally, because I know that it's been so programmed into me. And like Olivia, I'm going to cat scratch and do my best to dig it out of there, because, I believe, in Jesus's teaching that, we're not to judge each other, we're to love each other. And that's all, to see the light in each other, no matter what this bodysuit says. So anyway, I just wanted to say that was a very helpful, that unexamined assumption. And that's where I find my gold is when I really look at, well, what gives me, why do I think that? Where did that come from? And so I just wanted to offer that into the conversation, and to say to Sekou, we haven't seen your guidebook yet.
Yeah, I'm definitely working on it. I appreciate the nudge. I'm definitely working on it, because I think that's the other part of my answer to Bob. Like, I think the work is showing the film, but also having the conversation afterwards. And I've had lots of experience with that, preaching to the choir, as I've said, but I'm now developing the skill set to have that conversation across the aisle. And so, yeah, I've been working diligently and pulling resources together, and I'm excited to see where it'll take me.
Wonderful.
Very good. And we have, before we close here,
Karen had her hand up.
Karen would like to jump into the conversation. So Karen, go ahead.
Do you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So to really, because we are just at our overtime. I mean, obviously, thank you so much. The hoodie line, like you saying, the hoodie was so comfortable. Like, that line for me was a transmission. And I think it does speak to the style that you intentionally, Sekou, are, putting the movie out there as. When Jelana, when you said, this has been going on forever for Black people, I certainly wasn't aware of that. And so what I've learned so much is how much white is a social construct. And I can get, I'm so sentimental, so I can get mushy, blah, blah, when's all this gonna end? Yet, and I do, as well as the part I'm seeing is exactly this, the conversation we're having. Marius, I liked when you asked that question, when you shared like the first, when you were, with racism, and are other people having first realizing that they are racist. And I got to really witness that in my boys this year, and in myself. And I do have hope, because that a lot more people are realizing that now. Maybe not enough, as Bob says, yet there are. And I just even have seen my world change with who I'm hanging out with and being involved with, and the conversations we're having, and speaking up in my own family, to my 90-year-old parents, where I can see the depth of racism in even among, my dad who's Mexican and was also like, had things against him growing up in a school where there was mostly white people, yet he doesn't think he's racist at all towards Black people. And he is in his languaging. And I got to see that so clearly. So the movie, I mean, I know tomorrow, and probably tonight, my friend who's staying over, the first conversation I'm going to have is about the hoodie, and how a simple conversation about a hoodie can go to this depth of, I've never had to think about putting on a hoodie other than it being really comfortable and keeping me warm and going anywhere. And so I can start with that conversation, which might sound like nothing, yet leading to this and to your movie, and just, I think it's going to take a lot of those little moments of, that is sometimes what I've experienced this past 6 months, wakes somebody up a little bit to their own awareness. So there's a lot of things I could say, yet for sake of time, I just, to be continued, that we keep continuing these conversations. So thank you.
Yeah, so just closing out and piggybacking on something you said, I think another part of the universality of the film is the test driving part, because we've all been on test drives. And so that's one thing that can wake people up, because they're like, I've been on test drives. None of that ever happened to me. So there's that. And then just to circle back to the hoodie, I've mentioned this hero hoodie earlier, but didn't fill in all the blanks. So I created hero hoodies as a way to give brand new clothing to the unhoused community here in Nashville, and it is expanding rapidly. I'm going to 3 different cities this month, and the idea is you get one for yourself, and then one is given to the unhoused community. And it's just, I intended to do it one time for this one event. It was the 3rd annual Hoodies for the Homeless event here in Nashville, and it's just really taken off. And it's also given me the opportunity to reappropriate the image of Black men in hoodies. And if you're interested, check it out. The website is giveherohoodies.com.
Giveherohoodies.com. Okay. You know, I just want to say, I don't know if this sounds gratuitous or not, but I just want to say I apologize for my ignorance. I apologize for the hurt that we haven't been treating each other fairly and seeing each other as a child of God that we all are. And, you know, I just hope you accept my sincerity in that, you know, it's just a gesture, and I just continue to do what I can to continue to awaken myself and to share that with others. And I really, really appreciate that you came here tonight.
Well, that's the bigger gesture. You invited us here. You invited us to
Yeah,
conversation
absolutely.
community. So that is massive. That's huge. That's what we need.
I just think that so many things here were so precious and brave and heartbreaking. And I just really thank you, gentlemen, for coming and being part of the conversation tonight.